You're watching the Recharge Your Life video series, and I'm your host, Phaedra Antioco. Now, right now, we're putting a different spin on things. If you've been watching health summits, and learning about how to rewire your brain and things like that, I want you to pay attention to this interview with Joel Markwit and Antonia Dodge. They are personality hackers. And those relationships where maybe you might have trouble understanding the person or communicating, or maybe you're just not feeling heard. This is the interview for you to watch. So get a pen and paper handy as Joel Markwit and Antonio Dodge talk about personality hacking using, the Myers-Briggs test. So they're going to be talking about deeper levels of Myers-Briggs using personality systems for personality growth. So let me tell you a little bit about Joel Markwit and Antonia Dodge. They are the co-founders of Personality Hacker and co-authors of the book Personality Hacker: Harness the Power of Your Personality Type to Transform Your Work, Relationships, and Life. And this is so great. And Joel and Antonia have hosted the #1 Myers-Briggs podcast since 2014 and have produced over 20 personal growth programs. So stay tuned as I introduce you to this wonderful concept about personality typing. And they are a wealth of resource. And I'd love for you just to go down the rabbit hole of looking at personality types. It just might create a lot more freedom and less pain in your life. Hi, Joel and Antonia. Thanks for being here with me today.
Hi.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
So I love the name of your podcast, Personality Hacker. And where did that come from? How did you guys get involved with really discussing and learning about different personality types?
Well, I've been fascinated by personality type for most of my life. And the etymology of that is being a really awkward teenager who had a lot of struggle making friends. And so typology and personality type systems were one of the technologies I discovered in the host of my mother's library and all of her books. I grabbed a book on personality type, particularly Myers-Briggs personality types. And it felt like it gave me a tool to be able not only to understand myself, but other people, and to be able to interface better. I was a very obnoxiously geeky kid. So there are geeky kids who are quiet and keep to themselves and are wallflowers. And oftentimes when they tell their stories, I'm a little envious of the fact that they were quiet wallflowers, because I was geeky, but I was loud and had loud energy. And so nobody I couldn't slip under the radar. So I wanted to find ways to interface with other people and hopefully, fingers crossed, use some of that loud energy in a way that would attract people as opposed to repel them. And typology systems were one of the first times that I started to understand that I was wired in a similar way to other people, a group of people that were like me, not everybody, and I wasn't everybody's cup of tea. But then when I started to understand that there were layers to this, it wasn't just a profile that described sort of an overview of who I was, but actually there were some really complex technologies buried underneath all of this, then I realized that there was a way to not only understand myself and other people and interface, but there was actually a way to optimize who I was. And so the phrase personality hacker, which is actually not intended to describe us, we're not the personality hackers. It was more of an insinuation that there's a way to get into the coding of your mind for you, and that you can hack your own personality. You can get in there and understand it and be able to sort of take it apart as a system. And if you can take it apart as a system and understand it, then there are ways to optimize, to create a lifestyle that's more ergonomic to it, and to do things that allow you to, to basically get around some of the challenges that other people experience when their identity is a mystery to themselves. Well, there are those of us who want to hack the system, who want to get underneath it and to be able to have some control over how they show up in the world.
Okay, yeah, I'm just processing that, just taking that in, because that's important. And I don't know if a lot of people really understand. Like, I'm a certain personality type, and this is how I'm showing up. And this is who my husband is, or my boss is this personality type. So that's really interesting to just a whole nother spin.
I think one of the things this really becomes profound for people when they realize this. a lot of people watching right now are into personal growth, self-help. They're learning ways to heal themselves, achieve like different things in their life. And you might, like, everybody's had this example of picking up a self-help or personal growth book, and you read it and you're like, these are great ideas, but this advice just doesn't apply to me. Well, it's probably written by a different personality type than you. And then you read another book, and you're like, this resonates with me like crazy. And you just follow it and it works out great. And it's because different types respond to different growth paths. And that's one of the things we've really focused on, is we understand that different types respond to different growth strategies and paths like this. And so we try to do a lot of work on really helping people access the things that will help them grow and how they're wired, how their minds and hearts show up. So it's not just a one size fits all, like a lot of personal growth stuff that comes out now.
Absolutely. I love it. And that's why, again, I called this Recharge Your Life. Like, okay, let's look at how we are shaped. Let's look at those hidden traumas that we've had in our lives, those experiences that have shaped us. And I want to offer some strategies today to like, oh, yeah, gee, that might be my personality type that's doing that. Oh, I need to have awareness. I want to rewire my brain. How can they start making those changes to then be more happy, more joyful, more excited, more creative than being stuck on the problem? Because sometimes those self-help books just aren't enough. So subconscious too.
Absolutely. So of course, in typology world, in order for anything to be helpful, the first element of the journey is to self-diagnose your personality type. And it depends on what system you're using. So some of our favorites are, we use a lot of Myers-Briggs, we use a lot of Enneagram, some other systems like something called spiral dynamics. But any typology system you use, the first thing is to accurately diagnose your type. And sometimes that can be a journey for people because you're looking for something that gives language to parts of who you are that are languageless, right? Like the deeper layers of how your mind is operating. And it very much becomes a fish and water scenario where if you were to ask a fish to describe water, where would they begin, right? Like it's everything to them. It's their home, it's their vehicle, it's their latrine, like literally it's everything. And when it comes to how we're wired, how our minds are wired, it is everything to us. We don't know how our minds are wired differently than other people because we'd first have to recognize that we are wired differently than other people. Like other people are seeing the world in profoundly different ways. And even that can sometimes be a massive aha to another person. So once you realize that you're wired differently than others, then the task of trying to figure out how that could be the case and in what specific ways is quite a challenge. So what's nice about a lot of these systems and these tools is that they're built on the minds of frankly brilliant people who have discovered components like archetypes that have lived on for millennia that help diagnose that there's a certain set or limited number of patterns of how people can be wired. Okay. So in the Myers-Briggs system, a lot of people taking that, for example, are familiar with what's called the 4-function or the 4-letter code. So it's like 4 letters put together. And some people who have some familiarity with it will kind of understand what they mean. I think E&I is extrovert and introvert. I think TNF means thinker feeler. But what do those actually mean? But what's interesting about Myers-Briggs is that 4-letter code, while it became very, very popular to know your 4-letter code, was actually built on the work of Carl Jung. And Carl Jung's work was not about 4 dichotomies that are mostly behavioral, right? How you behave in the outside world. But we're actually analyzing the brain for different cognitive processes, different ways that our minds are fundamentally wired to process information differently. Okay. And there's 4 different, what are called perceiving functions, or we call them information gathering functions, and 4 different decision-making or judging functions. And so that makes 8 cognitive functions in total. And everybody has 1 from each category that is their favorite way of understanding how the world works and their favorite way of making decisions. And it's a combination of those 2 things that actually makes your personality type. Okay. So your personality type isn't just a series of like, oh, you like to talk to people, or you don't really enjoy parties, you'd prefer the library, or whatever a lot of the stereotypes are around. It's actually more, how are you taking in information? What are you programmed to look at? What are you programmed to find fascinating and to feel a compulsion to follow? And then once you understand your compulsions of information gathering and what you are naturally attracted to, what creates sort of the shiny object for you, because we're all programmed to see something different as a shiny object. Once you realize what your shiny objects are, well, then how is your brain naturally wired to determine the value and worth of that shiny object. And each of us has a different way that we're programmed to determine the value of those things. So just in that, just knowing that some people are programmed to be super kinesthetic and in their bodies, right? Like they're programmed to take information in by acting things out, by physically engaging with their environment. Other people are programmed to understand information by detaching from their environment and going into a meta perspective and getting as far away from quote unquote reality as possible so they get enough distance to be able to imagine what's happening behind the curtain. There are some people who are programmed to take in a scene that they've experienced and then go post-process the memory and to try to figure out all the learning they can get from that. And then there are other people who are programmed to explore life and understand bigger patterns based on engagement and making connections and having what-if conversations. So just knowing that we're programmed in different ways to take in information can sometimes, that alone, even if you don't know what you are, or maybe your spouse is, or your boss is, or whatever, just knowing that you could be programmed differently is sometimes a massive aha to go, oh, yes. I'm totally programmed to be a what-if person, and my spouse is programmed to be a review person and to go and review their memories and try to figure things out in post. That right there could explain why we have so many arguments about how I'm always trying to get out and have all these big patterned abstract conversations, and they just want to kind of stay in and review what's already happened. And already a lot of arguments and challenges and
trying to fix them and mold them. And if I just, and they will. And
that's right.
I see so much physical and emotional pain because people are in these relationships and not accepting or knowing or aware that there is a personality type. Like I could just see an introvert living with an extrovert. You know, just how diverse it could be, and just how it could wreak havoc on relationships.
Well, and I think one of the bigger challenges isn't just us trying to fix other people, which always happens, by the way. All of us 100% of the time are doing it, right? We're always trying to teach the world. We're always trying to set the world straight, right? According to us. But I think the reason why we do that is because it's actually a defensive tactic. We're doing it because we feel the world is doing that to us. Right? We always feel judged, or that we are on the receiving end of other people saying that we should be doing it differently than we are. And so we don't feel like we have permission to show up completely authentically. We don't feel like we have permission to design a life that is suited for us so that we can see the return on us being in a context that's ergonomic for who we are.
Right.
And if you can get some of that diagnosis down, if you can understand how you're wired and create a life that honors how you're wired, as opposed to constantly sort of fighting against it and trying to shove a, square peg in a round hole all the time, then all this energy, all this mental and psychological energy that gets applied to just trying to fit your life now gets recouped. And now you can pour it into creative things. You can pour it into healing work. You can pour it into achieving bigger things and building your self-esteem. So I think one of the nice things about personality psychology is that it's a tool for recouping energy. It's a tool for getting a lot of, your psychological and emotional energy that gets siphoned out by a world that doesn't really understand you, or a world that you can't really
have, right? How does this personality get shaped?
Exactly. So you can recoup all of that and then pour it into the things that mean something to you. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why we believe so passionately that there is a big cross section between understanding typology and the personal development world.
Okay, great. Yeah, because this is a lot. So there's certain things that drive us. And if I know integrity, being aligned with what your inner desire is and what your outer desire is. Like, I want to work in this career, I want to feel this way, but you're staying in a job that doesn't serve you. It causes this discontent and just this torment sometimes. So it's just getting in touch with, first, I just love the idea of like, let's pause for a minute and realize you're running on a certain app, a certain program that is called your personality type, right?
Yeah. As an example, there's 4 personality types that use one of those mental processes that Antonia talked about. That's called extroverted feeling. Let's just talk about it as an example right now.
Okay.
Extroverted feeling makes decisions based on what gets everybody's needs met. It helps make its decisions of what it's going to do in the world, the should statements of its life, based on ensuring that it's connected to other people, the social dynamics of a group are well fed metaphorically, and sometimes literally, but needs are met, harmony is created. We've actually nicknamed this process harmony because its end goal is to reduce discord and boost and support harmony. One of the challenges, though, is sometimes that type of person sometimes sacrifices their own truth or what's important to them on behalf of keeping the group or the social dynamic harmonious. And so we've noticed that, for example, those 4 personality types that use that process tend to lose a sense of themselves. They tend to, in like relationships, romantic relationships, they tend to lose themselves to the other person. They tend to get into codependency more often because they truly have a goal. Like their intent is so good because they want to create harmony. But what happens in order to do that, sometimes they forget, oh, I'm giving my power away. I don't have strong boundaries here. So I'm allowing this desire, which is good for harmony, to be overdone on one side to where these types have reported they don't even know who they are or what they want sometimes. Like they get down a road with family and relationships and all that, they lose sense and they go, I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't know what I care about.
And that's pain, right?
Yes.
That's what I deal with. That's the emotional and physical pain. And it literally can manifest in the muscle tissue, in our nervous system.
Absolutely.
And it's like, okay, road, over and over. I keep running this pattern.
Yeah.
Okay, how do I break it? You guys have any tips? First, we have to have awareness. We have to shine the light on it. That's an aha moment there.
Well, so I think Joel's example is fantastic because this mental process, extroverted feeling, which we call harmony, it's the decision-making process of everybody who's an FJ in the Myers-Briggs system. So all 4 FJ, INFJ, ISFJ, ENFJ, and ESFJs. So all 4 of those types use this function. And as Joel mentioned, the goal is noble. Like the goal for this decision-making process, or effectively how you're determining the value and worth of everything you're doing in your life, is so that you can get everybody's needs met. But because because the tool is neutral, it can go a dark path or it can go a light path. So one of the ways of breaking the habits that go down roads of, say, having really bad boundaries or codependency, or pushing away your personal truths in order to be acceptable to other people, is to go towards the healthy elements of this tool, which are understanding that all true harmony is done through conflict resolution. So instead of avoiding those bad truths, avoiding what could be perceived as harmful truths and just being silent when you actually have a personal truth, recognizing that what you're creating is not the real thing of harmony. It's a synthetic version. It's a sort of sweeping everything under the rug version, which for the moment feels like you're gaining, but it's not sustainable.
And it builds.
That's right. Exactly. So looking at this process as something to build sustainable harmony means that you take the hit of speaking your truth when you need to. You take the hit of looking like you might be mean when you're actually just creating healthy boundaries. You sort of take the ego hit of maybe somebody thinking you're not the nice person by actually creating better decisions and healthier relationships in your life, so that people see you as somebody who stands up for themselves and recognizes that when they're trying to get everybody's needs met, they're part of everyone, that they're not neglecting themselves, that they're actually putting themselves into that equation. So the first thing is always awareness. And then the second piece is realizing how you're using these mental processes in a way that is not ultimately healthy for you or other people, and to transform your relationship with this mental process to do it in a better way, to do it in a more sustainable way that you can build skill on, because all of these are also skills, right? They're skills that we write on top of this wiring.
And I also want to say, just because when I work on bodies, I sometimes get this notion of, was there a time in your life that you didn't get to speak up for yourself? And their throat is just, and I just have them literally yell and get that out. And then all the muscles release. So it's like, what is holding it in doing to your body, your emotional and physical body? What is shoving it under the rug? And that's when all of a sudden you're just having this tumultuous life, because it's piled up under that rug, piled up.
Yeah.
And until you bring awareness to it, and then find those pieces to change, because sometimes just reading a book isn't enough. You need the guidance and the help to figure out what you're doing, that maybe what you're doing isn't working.
Right. And when it comes to elements like, sort of bringing it to this concept of personality types, these people who, the 4 FJ types in the Myers-Briggs system who use extroverted feeling, we're just picking on them, just probably because a lot of your audience is this type, quite frankly.
Yeah, and you might be as well.
And you might be as well.
Yeah.
So when you have this function, what's interesting is, again, this goes way deeper than most Myers-Briggs sort of corporate world speak, but it's linked to another function. And that function is called introverted thinking, or what we've nicknamed it accuracy. And it's about truth at all cost. The 4 personality types who use this function well as a primary way of engaging the world are all the TPs in the Myers-Briggs system. So ENTPs, ESTPs, INTPs, and ISTPs. And they feel a compulsion to speak truth. And in fact, most of the time throughout their life, they're punished for it, because the truth is not always something that everybody wants to hear. And they're not necessarily great at articulating it in the nicest way. And so sometimes they'll get a martyr complex, like, all I want to do is speak the truth and nobody's listening or nobody wants to hear it, right? And then they get kind of a martyr complex. But what's interesting is both of these functions, harmony and accuracy, or extroverted feeling and introverted thinking, they're actually 2 sides of the same coin. So everybody who has harmony also has accuracy, and everybody who has accuracy also has harmony. And it's actually the work of integrating the other side. So for harmony users, they have to integrate the accuracy part of themselves, the willingness to say truths that appear to hurt people's feelings, but are actually the truths that they need to hear, so that you don't get 10 years into a relationship, say, and go, I actually was never invested in this relationship in the beginning. I just felt bad, or I couldn't say it then. And now you've got like 10 years of a life built.
This is common. This is so common.
That's right, that you're destroying, when if you had just said something 10 years ago and actually spoken your hurtful truth, you wouldn't have cost so much to yourself and to the other person. So for the harmony people, it's about integrating that shadow side of them, that other side of introverted thinking or accuracy. And for the other side, for introverted thinking or accuracy people, it's about integrating the part of them that feels compassion, that when they're saying these truths, they say it in a way that comes from wanting what's in the best interest of the other person, not just wanting to say your truth, right, as a compulsion, but actually recognizing that truths are a gift you give to the world, but they won't receive the gift if it's not packaged well. So then it's integrating the part that understands how to wrap these truths in kindness, and so it can be received. And we're just talking about 2 of the 8 functions, and all of the functions that people's personality types are made up of have really very fleshed out ways of understanding how the mind is wired, and the compulsions we have, and the things that we need to do to integrate the other parts of us so that we show up in the best way possible. So is that some of these pain points, which is, I'm always giving myself as a martyr to everybody else and nobody appreciates it. Well, then those people need to integrate a little bit of the other side. And then the people who are like, I just want to say my truth and nobody wants to listen to me. Well, they need to integrate something as well. And all 16 of the personality types have something that needs to be integrated, has a part of themselves that is underrepresented, that if they were able to integrate, they would have much better returns on the things that they're trying to accomplish. It's hard for us to know these things until we pop up the hood and start tooling around and recognizing that there are things we can do here that quote unquote hack the system.
All right. And then do you mind if I pop up, I have a little graphic, it's a crude graphic of the 4 boxes, the 4 types. Do you mind if I pop that up so people can see it? And then tell them, because you have a personality test on your website, is that right?
We do.
Okay. So it's crude here, but if you just look at this, this is what we're talking about.
Right. So these are the 4 what are called dichotomies, and they're the 4-letter code that we mentioned before. The first of the 4-letter code in Myers-Briggs is introversion or extroversion. So depending upon which one you favor, you either go E or I. The second one is intuition or sensing, or intuitive or sensor. And this is about how you information gather or how you perceive the world. The third is thinking or feeling, and these are how you make decisions, or your decision-making processes. For thinkers, it's more about impersonal criteria, and for feelers, it's about personal criteria. And then judger or perceiver diagnoses how you want your world, which world you want to have organized, either the outer world, that's more of a judger, or the inner world, which is more of a perceiver. So when you know your preferences on all 4 of those, EI, NS, TF, and JP, once you know that, that's actually a decoder ring for what I'm talking about, or what we're talking about, which are the 8 cognitive functions. So each of those 16 types If you put these, lay out all the possible combinations, there's 16 different combinations of 4 letters. And each one of those lets you know and diagnoses those functions that are running underneath it, which is the wiring of your mind.
Okay, I could see almost every human is so different, but men and women, men versus women, married couple, like in a relationship, how it could be, there could be some conflict here.
Oh yeah.
'Cause you're like, you could be totally opposites, and maybe opposites attract. I don't know.
Well,
But
sometimes opposites get along a lot better than
Mhm.
people who are close enough but a little different. Sometimes
I
they're the ones
haven't
that have
figured
a lot
it
of-
out. I'm the wrong person to ask.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, but you're right. Opposites can sometimes have a lot of conflict. It usually comes down to what we've noticed, and again, it's not, these are not rules, but we've noticed that when people have similar ways of seeing the world, they have a similar worldview or the information gathering aspect of themselves. So you have 2 people who use intuition, for example, or you have 2 people that use sensing, for example, in a relationship or a friendship. Typically, again, I'm overgeneralizing, way overgeneralizing here, because there's always exceptions to these. Typically, it's nice to be with someone or around someone that sees the world very similar to how you see it.
Yeah.
And then your disagreements are what to do about what you see in the world. So Antonia and I, for example, are both intuitive. We're in a relationship, we're married, we have a business together, but we see the world in fairly similar ways. Usually our disagreements come from how are we going to act upon what we see. It's like she's a thinker, I'm a feeler. So we have different criteria for the decisions we make, but mostly we're at least seeing the same thing. What we've noticed is when people see things that are radically different, one person sees the world this way, A, another person sees it B, sometimes that's almost harder to reconcile, even if they make decisions in the same way, because their decisions are based on 2 very different criteria of what they're seeing. So we found that conflict can arise from that even more than the decisions we make, which is very interesting. It's kind of counterintuitive, right? You wouldn't necessarily think that. But that's something that we've noticed in relationships. Again, it's not a hard, fast rule. It's just a general, like, observational, anecdotal thing that I've noticed. I don't know if you have any more to say on that, but I
Because you
think
could
that's
be
something.
worlds apart.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. In the way you perceive things, right?
Someone who needs alone time versus someone who needs to be with people. Introvert, extrovert. It could definitely cause some interesting dynamics.
Yeah. And what's great about those kind of relationships is how I always look at it when people come and say, my spouse is driving me crazy, my boyfriend, girlfriend, my friend. It's like, well, that's a growth opportunity for you. Like, it's a great way for you to figure out ways to interface with a person that just thinks and behaves radically different. They want to go out every Friday night, every Saturday night. They want to go out and have fun and be social, and you just want to stay in and watch Netflix. That's a great opportunity for you to find access points. They are in your life. What a great opportunity for you now to grow that part of yourself, to allow them to almost take the lead in a way. And then you could take the lead in maybe helping them understand there's quiet times at home to get more reflective, to get in touch with who they are as a person on more of a deeper level. Like there's opportunities in these kind of really disparate relationships, I think, for growth. And that's how I've always chosen to approach my relationships, is what can I learn from this person, and how can I also be a teacher in that too?
Yeah, like pause for a minute here, everybody. Take that in, because I think we get so stubborn in our own way of being, and then we get mad. He needs to be this way. She needs to be this way. And that's where, when I deal with my coaching clients, usually there's this real resistance in their life. And if we can really look at that and resolve that, so they could feel safe in their own body and see 2 sides, or really there's 3 sides, his side, her side, and the truth. It's so interesting, but I see this as just a lot of pain, causing a lot of pain for people at work with a boss that they can't, and they vilify them, or their spouse. I see that a lot.
Oh yeah.
And I think one of the challenges too is that 2 people can be having what they believe is the same conversation, but because they are wired to see the world so differently, they can actually be talking about radically different things, but they're using all the same language. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes the fights are actually just profound miscommunications. Like they're just like the conversations are going like this, and they're using all the same words, but all of these words mean something very different to them, not only because of how their minds are wired, but also because of their experiences through life and how their brains interpreted all of that information. And so I think what's nice about, and again, it gets real technical real fast, as you can tell. Like, I mean, we're just like kind of barely scratching the surface, and it's like, okay, that's too much. That's a lot. So
and
it
my
gets
audience
super.
This is all, I think, this is my 5th series. So my audience has not really delved into this, unless maybe at work they had to take the Myers-Briggs, and we haven't really said the name of Myers-Briggs. But yeah,
Right.
this is good stuff. So I'd like to keep it basic level.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Awareness. Hey, yeah, okay, now what? How do I make this marriage or this job successful for me?
Right.
How can I handle it?
So it does get real technical real quick, but even if you don't know anything,
Okay.
right? Here's the lesson. Here's the foundational lesson of typology is that there are different types. There are, right? And people are wired differently. And so if you can understand even that core fundamental principle, when you hear something that sounds like the other person is being obtuse or deliberately obnoxious, because that's how we interpret other people's types when they don't see what we see. We all assume that what is very obvious to us is very obvious to everybody else. And we also assume that whatever our blind spot is a blind spot for everyone else as well, that that's just not important and we don't need to talk about that. So if you understand that other people are coming at you with a completely different mindset, then when they do something that appears to be obtuse, it's not that they see what you see and are just as up on the game as you are in that way. It might be that they don't even see what you're seeing. So they're not being obtuse. And when they don't come to the conclusion, the very obvious conclusion that you've come to, it doesn't mean that they're fighting you or resisting you or trying to be deliberately obnoxious. It means that they're seeing things very differently. So
Yes,
to approach people,
wearing.
right, exactly, the lenses they're seeing through. So to approach people with curiosity first.
Okay.
When you believe somebody is being obtuse or deliberately obnoxious, those are always the two things that are the marker that you're talking to somebody of a different type that sees things very differently. Because most of us are not trying to play the fool, and most of us are not trying to be deliberately annoying. So if you see somebody doing that, come with a curiosity and start asking questions around how they're experiencing this thing. And that actually is good because it gets you out of the zone of having to judge. You don't have to project anything onto them. You don't have to project anything onto yourself. You don't have to make a judgment call about what's going down or why it's not working out, or you don't have to get in a space of decision making yet. Get into a perceiving place, get into a curiosity and information gathering place, and just start asking questions. So you and I both use this word, and we seem to be arguing around this word. What does this word actually mean to you? When you're defining it, what's the picture that's going on in your head? And then after you hear what they have to say, then if they're open to it, you share the picture in your head. And you go, you know what? We've been using the same word, but I think we've actually been talking about two different things. We might actually agree on this. So this whole fight is for nothing because we actually agree. We're just using the same language to represent different things, or vice versa. We might be agreeing, but using different language. So what's going on for you when you talk about this thing? And if we can approach it with curiosity, we don't even have to master personality types. You just master understanding that other people are coming from a different place. Now, what's nice about typology or personality systems is that if you have some of this under your belt, it's much easier to diagnose what's going on for them. So when you start hearing them use certain kinds of language, you go, okay, I'm pretty sure I know what's going on here. And so instead of having to take 3 hours to have this conversation around what's going on in their head and why and all that, it can maybe be a 20-minute conversation. So the tool and the technology isn't imperative. It just makes things much faster. It just makes the conversations much faster and streamlined.
We still fight. We just fight faster.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah.
In my world, I guess I would say, oh, someone triggers me. You know, I've been triggered, and that's a big thing where I look at people's nervous systems and let's start paying attention to what's triggering. But if we can perceive it differently through a different lens of curiosity and acceptance, and then communicate.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a little hard for some people.
Well, and what's so key about this too is if you start to approach it with curiosity and going, like the first step is going, I'm going to give this person permission to be who they are in their full personhood, however they're wired, however they're showing up.
Yeah.
I'm going to be curious. And the act of doing that, of giving that person permission, gives yourself permission to be who you are too. So it's a key, like if you can start training, if we can all start training ourselves to do this more, it enables us to give people permission to be who they are. And almost instantly we start to get permission for ourselves, which is kind of what we're after anyway. Like a lot of our resistances, a lot of things that trigger us, well, at least for me, let me say this. I won't project this on anybody else.
For me.
When I'm triggered, I realize that it's usually something that I haven't given myself permission around. It's something around my permission or my view of myself. I'm trying to protect something here. And so I'm going and saying, you're bad and wrong. You did something here that made me feel this way. Oh, really? Or is it something I've got an issue with that I'm pushing onto that person? And when they make me feel triggered or like a little bit, ooh, I don't like feeling that way, what does that speak about me? So this is really cool, is that as you start to train yourself to do this, I think it gives yourself permission too.
Yeah. What are those, like, what are some questions in that moment? Do you guys have any strategies that we can teach here, that just obviously being aware, like look at what's your motive? How are you wrong in this maybe? Or how are you misperceiving this?
Well, I think there's a lot of great material around communication and how to get to a place of curiosity. But one of the things I've really enjoyed picking up was one of the tactics in nonviolent communication,
Okay.
which is when you hear somebody say something, just simply like ensuring that you got the message they intended by saying things like, so what I hear you say is, and then repeat back to them what you believe they said, like how you interpreted it. And then that gives the person an opportunity to refine any miscommunication that may have happened, which is if they say something that's triggering to you and you say, okay, what I think I hear you say is, and you repeat it, and then they go, no, that's not what I meant at all, then your trigger was for nothing, right? Or it was just it was like a moment of miscommunication that can be then sort of settled by refining it and ensuring that it's not just a 0 to 60 situation. You kind of put the brake on the triggering event itself.
Okay.
The question I ask myself is, what intelligence is this person speaking with? Because I have a certain quote unquote intelligence that I value and I think I bring to the world. And so I overvalue my experience. We all do this as humans. I'm overvaluing the intelligences, and that might be more emotional intelligence for me because I'm a feeler man. So I have more of an emotional intelligence than maybe an analytical intelligence. I talked to Antonia, who's a thinker woman, and she starts talking with more analytical stuff. And I might go, well, you're not honoring this or that or how I feel. And I'm going, well, wait a second.
Oh my
I
gosh.
have to ask myself, what intelligence is she bringing right now? She's bringing more of a digital, cerebral, logical intelligence. So I can step back and go, okay, it's a different intelligence than what maybe I initially value or would instinctually value. And it certainly isn't the way I show up, but it is an intelligence for her. And I think if she does the same thing, she might run into somebody that's very feeler based, talking about getting needs met or getting, all these different things, like a harmony type person. She might be, oh, that's ridiculous. Like, why do we have to make people feel this way? Let's get the truth out there. And then she goes, wait a second, what intelligence is this person bringing? They understand social dynamics. They understand how people have to feel to get something done or feel good in a social group. So I think that's a really good question that I've asked myself a lot. What intelligence is this person bringing?
Nice. Okay.
That could be helpful.
Yeah, I love it. I love this. Great conversation. Yeah.
I think what's been interesting for us, because we're actually very similar personality types. If the listener is familiar with Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENTP and he's an ENFP, which on paper looks only one letter different, right? But it actually alters how we're wired. I'm wired in a very different way than he's wired, in particular with our decision making. And what we realized is, while we have fantastic conversations, because that's where we meet in idea generating and what if conversations and whiteboard sessions and all that, that's when we're in the zone. But the moments that we have had some of our like the "you don't love me" conversations, right? Like in that relationship where you're like, oh, clearly this person who married me and committed to an entire life with me obviously clearly doesn't love me because of this one thing that they did, right? All of those moments have always been for him when I don't hold space for his emotions, and for me when he doesn't hold space for my thoughts. And by that, I mean when he's sharing his emotions and I'm immediately trying to figure out what to do about them, right? Like I'm trying to solve it, kind of like in a sort of stereotypical male-female relationship in reverse. But when he shares his emotions, I'm always like, well,
let's get to work.
Let's make you feel better, right? Let's, like, how do I get you to feel better? How do I solve this for you? And he's always like, no, I don't want you to solve it. I just want to share how I'm feeling. Like, I just want you to understand. Right. And so what I realized is that he's actually looking for validation. It took me forever to figure that out, but I went, oh, he's looking for validation. So now I can like conscientiously ensure that I'm listening and validating that he has a right to these emotions. Right. So instead of getting to,
well, let's be fair. I come with the pretense that I want you to solve it, though. Here's the thing, though. She's not giving the full picture. I do come with the pretense that I want her to solve something, ultimately. But I want to feel validated first.
Right.
I want my emotions to feel validated first. So, that I'm not crazy, or I'm not just feeling for the sake of it. I'm not silly, like
I'm insane.
Yeah. So I want to feel validated first.
Another level. Your inner child. We could say, Joel's inner child. I mean, the psychology of it could go so deep.
Right. So through these fights now, I've just learned to say, look, actually, I need you to validate what I'm feeling first. I'll actually ask her. I'll say, can you just validate what I'm feeling first? And then we can talk about solutions.
Or if I catch it, I'll ask if he needs validation. I'll tell him I'm immediately going into problem solving. I can feel myself do it, but do you just need me to listen, right? Do you just need to feel like I'm here for you and that you need validation? We've gotten really transparent in our fights, by the way. We basically do
That's
a play-by-play as we're fighting.
Okay, I'm thinking of people I've worked with, and usually it's like, sorry, usually it's the husband or the spouse causing the pain, and there's just not communication. So, but I'm thinking of the women I work with, and my husband will never change. He's so stuck in his ways. How do they break that open a little? What's like one little step of courage they could do to be more open? Because once they speak their truth, I mean, Joel, doesn't that feel so much better when you get to feel your emotions and share with her?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like freedom.
Well, to be honest, it's an ego hit. Like I don't want to admit to myself that it is validation I'm seeking first.
I know.
And I'll even say that. I'll say, look, I'm going to take an ego hit by admitting this right now, but I value our relationship more than I value my ego in this moment. So I'm going to say that this is an ego hit for me to admit this, but I need you to validate what I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I need to get to the place probably eventually where I can say it without having to say this is an ego hit. I'm trying to call out my own ego before she can, right? Because I'm still, it's like a double protection of my ego in a way. Yeah. And I know that's like my next thing I'm trying to work on, but that's at least it's like training wheels or scaffolding for me to be able to do that. So I think I think that is definitely a way to do it. When you speak your truth, when you can have validation or ask for the validation you need, particularly for the women that you might be dealing with, I think not all men, but many men will, if they're told directly what is needed, will address that need. Like I think most men want to, if they love a woman and they're in a relationship with her, they desire to help meet needs or fix things. I think a lot of men are very insecure. They don't know what to do, especially in the emotional realm or relationship realm. They've almost outsourced that to the women in their life, the relationship that they're in, the woman they're with. And they have a lot of insecurity about that world. And it's more fear than it is like disillusionment or obstinance or anything like it's a lot of fear and insecurity for men to be in that emotional space. So I think one thing for women to realize is if they understand, because a lot of men would identify like a thinker mindset, that's kind of how they're wired, or at least been trained to think that way.
Right.
And so they have a lot of resistance and they're like, well, other guys judge me. Will I look weak? Like there's just a lot of stuff going on for guys, a lot of insecurity that, understanding this about type can also help with too.
Well, and to piggyback off of that, not that I'm a man, but because I am a thinker, I understand how painful it is when I share my thoughts and the other person doesn't hold space for my thoughts. So the assumption is that we get our feelings hurt over emotions all the time, but that's not accurate. If you're a thinker and you're sharing some of your thoughts and the other person goes, well, that's stupid, or you shouldn't think that, especially if you're working the thought out and you're like sharing it with your intimate partner because you've got like a germ of a thought and you're working it out and you share with them in order to kind of understand it. And they go, you're not supposed to think that, or that could be offensive to someone. That's actually painful to the thinker because sharing your thoughts is sharing the most intimate parts of who you are. And so I don't think a lot of people, particularly maybe women who are feelers in relationship with men who are thinkers, I don't think women realize how hurtful that can be to a thinker. And so instead of going, well, you're not supposed to think that, or that could offend somebody, being curious and holding space for their thoughts, holding space for something that they're just trying to like get out of their head and work through, even if it sounds horrifically offensive in the beginning, it's not necessarily always a fully formed thought. And a person who holds space for your thoughts, that won't judge them, that won't think you're a bad person for thinking them, you're far more likely to then bring them in to help refine the thoughts. But it's one of those things where I think when I hear people say, well, my husband's obstinate and he'll never change. Obstinance is just an ego defense for preventing hurt. And putting up walls is a way to prevent somebody who you think is inevitably going to hurt you. If they think it's inevitable, but they love you and they want to maintain a relationship, where they have the walls or where they believe that the pain is going to come from. And so if you're like, well, my husband will never, or my spouse or my partner, whether you're a man or a woman or what kind of relationship you're in, if you're like, they'll never change this thing. Well, that's the thing that they have the most fear around. That's the thing that they're assuming you will hurt them around. So being curious about the wall and where the wall came from is, I think, one of the best things you can do, is not address why they have the wall, but address the wall itself. Like, there's a wall here and it's impenetrable, and I'm assuming it's there for a reason, and I'm assuming that you believe you have to be defensive. So what can I do to show that I'm willing to meet you halfway on where this wall is? And it doesn't always work, but here's the thing about personality types is when you learn personality types, you also learn the language of the mind. You learn the language that's native to each personality. And so you can start using the language that makes sense to them as opposed to simply the language that makes sense to you. And when somebody starts hearing their language in somebody else's mouth, there's a sense of trust. There's a sense of, oh, this person can understand me. So that's one of the reasons why I would recommend that people start going down this rabbit's hole if it's at all interesting to them, right? Even if it triggers just a little bit of interest. Going into this rabbit's hole also gives you the technology of the language of your spouse, and you start to use that language and they start to feel a greater sense of intimacy.
Awesome.
There's something that somebody said that I thought was brilliant. It was a marketing term, but I think it works in relationships too, which is if you can articulate somebody's problem better than they can articulate it themselves, they will unconsciously ascribe to you the solution.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so if you can articulate what you think is going on for the person, or like try to understand them, you're showing them that you've taken the time and effort to really think through their experience. And they'll start to trust that maybe you've also thought through it enough to have a solution. And that includes in intimacy and relationships.
Right. And even just saying, I'm trying to understand your viewpoint. The word that's coming up for me is sometimes, are we just living in an illusion?
The answer is yes.
From our perspective, yeah.
We're all got these brains and this wiring, and we're running these apps and
Yeah. Well, it's a consensus reality. It's an agreed reality. We all just go, well, we're going to agree that money is real and it actually buys things. We're going to agree that these are all the customs and social ways we should engage with each other. We shake hands and we smile, and we just agree to all that, right? As a society.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you. It is an illusion in a lot of ways.
Okay, so can a personality be changed? You guys are personality hackers. How do we hack these personalities?
Well, it would be like, can a body be changed? Well, it was basically what you're asking. It's like, it's
in a gentle,
similar,
easy way.
Yeah, well, similar question. Like, so am I ever going to look like an NFL linebacker? I can build some more muscle. I can build some more muscle. I'm about 6'2", but I'm probably never going to be like 350 pounds and like for the NFL, like to play as a football player. But I can go to the gym and I can work on my body type, and I can change, quote unquote, by developing my body to the strength that is wired to who I am. And I think personality works very similarly in that it will look like change over time, but what you're actually doing is you're developing it, just like if you went to the gym to exercise. So it'll look like change to your friends and family. It'll look like you've actually changed as a person, or your personality, quote unquote, has changed. If I went and worked out and built up huge muscles, everybody's like, whoa, you look so different, Joel. You've really changed. Yes, I have. But really what's happened is I've developed myself into my full, muscular expression. So let's use that in a personality way. You've developed your personality over time. You continue to work on yourself in a personal growth fashion. And that looks like change to the outside world and even to yourself. But what have you actually done? You've actually just grown yourself into your full potential. And that's really how we see it here.
Yeah. There's a lot of evidence to indicate that we're probably born with our personality types. They've come out with burgeoning evidence that particularly introversion and extroversion is something that's hardwired into us. And so it makes sense that a lot of aspects of those kinds of elements of personality are hardwired into us from birth. So it's kind of like your skeletal structure. The skeletal structure doesn't change, but a lot of things around the skeletal structure can change, quite dramatically. So basically, like Joel was saying, sometimes we look so different that it appears as if we've fundamentally changed, but we actually haven't. The core is still the same. But what's nice is that means that we can change. Even if we can't change our skeletal structure, we can dramatically improve our health. And even if we can't change our personality type core, we can dramatically improve the health of who we are and become our best manifest self.
Wow, I'm just processing this. That's deep.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us on, by the way.
Yeah.
We appreciate showing up and talking with you. This has been great.
Yeah, this is great. It's kind of mind bending, this is definitely an interview we'd have to listen to over again. But if you're having trouble communicating, listeners, with your spouse, or your partner, whoever, have them watch this, because that can give them an example. I love how you guys have shared how you work together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
With the
Not always pretty.
with the differences.
Yeah.
And how can people find you? Because I know you have a great podcast and your website has a free assessment they can take to learn more.
Yeah, the best place to go is thepersonalityhacker.com. That's a great starting point. You could take a free test, find out your personality type. We have links to our podcast, our book, articles, lots of free resources for you once you know your type, to just kind of dive down the rabbit hole of learning more about yourself and the people in your life. So yeah, personalityhacker.com, great place to start.
Awesome. All right. Any last words, you guys? It's been so great having you and seeing such a great couple. Like I could see the chemistry between the two of you. That's awesome. It's just a great example what can be.
Yeah, I think that idea of permission is probably the last thing we want to leave. When you start to give yourself permission, or other people permission, you start to give yourself permission. And I think permission is something you don't know you need until you get it. It's something that when you are like, oh, I can be this? You mean the way I'm wired that's not a problem? That's actually what I should be doing? I can actually double down on it and become more of who I am in that way? Wow, that is super empowering. And that is, I think, when people get that spark, that flame lit inside of them, all bets are off. I think that's where you start to see people show up and they realize who they are and they start to live their life in congruity. So that's awesome.
I'm just thinking, thank you. That is great. Just do you. Be
Yeah,
you.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah. Antonia, any remaining thoughts?
Actually, Joel did such a good job of
You did.
buttoning up, putting a bow on top of it. Yeah, no, I would say that's absolutely the case. And I'm again, we talked a little bit about when we were sort of doing preamble before we started recording, and we talked a little bit about how we've chosen typology because it's a fantastic cookie crumb trail to personal growth and development.
I love it.
And so it's an on-ramp, and people who are already interested in who they are and their identity, one of the most natural things for them to ask next after they discover their type is, what do I do about it? And so we recommend that when people go down the rabbit's hole of personality typology systems, to also go down the rabbit's hole of growth with it. There's a lot of reward and return if you put them together, if you have those in lockstep with each other. So we highly recommend going down the rabbit's hole of type, but also simultaneously go down the rabbit's hole of growth, because that gives tremendous return on investment.
Yeah.
Awesome. You guys are awesome. I love it. This is great. Personalityhackers.com is where they can find you and go down the rabbit hole with your guidance, of course, right? You've got lots of great resources on your site.
We do. We have a ton of podcasts. We just did our 300th. So we've been doing podcasting forever. And so we have a lot of great podcasts, and as Joel mentioned, articles. And so, yeah, go check us out.
Thanks for opening our minds today on a whole new way of
Our pleasure.
seeing the world, a new pair of lenses.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was great. Like mind-bending for me. I hope it was for you too. If we can just look at our interactions in the world with the people who are in our lives with a different lens, just really having awareness. And I love the way that they spoke about harmony, because isn't that what we all want? We're all unique personalities, unique individuals. So if you loved this interview I just really, really loved it, feel free to consider purchasing this series so you can share it with your partner, with your loved ones. Really, you can make a change. It was clear with this couple, Joel, Mark Witt, and Antonia Dodge, that they were able to really work together. And yeah, it's never just perfect relationship where we don't fight, right? It takes work. It takes feeling good in your own body, feeling safe, and really examining and being open. And that's what I hope to share with you in the Recharge Your Life series. So if you love it, go ahead if you want to purchase it. It also includes some great bonuses, mapping trauma in your body, as well as a one-on-one 45-minute session with me. And I'd love to help you uncover and work through your hidden traumas. All right. Have a great rest of your day.